Thank you for listening to Crossroads Community Church of Jefferson Hills. At Crossroads, our mission is to be the church by sharing and showing the love of Christ and inviting others to be recipients of Christ's love. Now here's this week's message from Pastor Floyd Hughes.
This morning, I wanted to share a quick story with you before I introduce our guest speaker. So a few years ago, I was on vacation with Christy's family in Rochester. We were at her grandmother's house. That's how we vacation. We go to someone's house and relax. And I was making videos because that's how I relax. But in the comments of this video that I had posted, there was a lot of tense conversation going on, and I started getting frustrated because whenever you make videos and you claim Christian stuff, there are going to be people, especially if you put it on a public platform, people that come out and that kind of, hate and share their perspectives. Some do it in a nice way, some do it in a mean way, and there were some people doing it in rather disrespectful ways, and I'm okay if you don't believe what I believe, just don't be disrespectful of others. So that was causing some frustration. But also, there was someone who had genuine questions. They were asking questions like, does the Bible really say this? Or how can I honestly believe this? And it sounded like they were honestly trying to believe, so I was trying to answer their questions. But some of the Christians, who were well-intentioned, were just kind of throwing hate at them because they thought they were being mean-spirited and not really asking, how can this be true? But they thought they were just being mean. And so that caused even more frustration. And I kid you not, Christy, her mom, and her grandma, 3 generations of very strong-willed Italian women, were like, why are you wasting your time with those people? And they had a point, right? Because there was just a lot of people who didn't matter what I said, they weren't going to listen. But I told them, and I still feel this way today, sometimes, if you take the time, there might be just one person who's actually seeking truth, and you might be able to help them, especially if you're claiming to be a Christian, because a lot of people just want to know, why do you believe what you believe? And if you could share it with them, that doesn't mean they're going to become a Christian, but it might just change their life, right? And so I spent some time answering their questions, and I didn't want to come across as angry. I didn't want to come across as mean-spirited, but I also didn't want to come across, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to share this quickly. Like the guy that the Apostle John wrote about when we were walking through 3 John, and he said, I wrote to the church, but Diehl, who was a person who was claiming to be a Christian and who was in the church, who loves to be first, will not welcome us. So when I come, I'm going to call attention to what he's doing. And here's what he was doing in the church: spreading malicious nonsense about us, meaning other Christians, church leaders. Not satisfied with that, he refused to welcome other believers, and he stopped those who wanted to do so and put them out of the church. None of us wants to be that person that seems like we're coming across as, say, if you don't believe what I believe, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm going to hate on you. I'm going to talk bad about you. I'm going to spread lies about you. And I'm going to tell others you don't want to hang out with them either. Because that's not the church. That's not what we're supposed to be. But fast forward from a few years ago, where Christy, her mom, and her grandma were like, why are you doing this? To January of last year, right? Did another video, because that's what I do, hundreds of videos. Did another video, and Brie, actually, she commented on the video. I tried to find the actual video that she commented on. I could not, because I literally since then have done 1,000 videos, but she commented on it, and I responded, how can I help? What can I do to help you? And I'm going to ask her to come up here and share all of, in full detail, everything that led up to her reaching out, because it's intense, but it's also true, and it's also what a lot of people outside of these walls, and maybe some of you inside of these walls, are dealing with, or maybe some people in your family or people in your schools, your works, or circle of influence. But I'm also going to ask her to share everything that happened after she reached out, because we need more of that as well. So I'm going to ask you to give a warm welcome to Brie. As she comes up, Brie, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second because your mic is not producing for something.
Did I break it?
Oh, there you go. All right.
It likes me now?
Is that better? Okay, here you go. Sorry.
So anyhow, I started talking to Pastor Floyd and told him that, hey, I'm really about to take myself out of this world. I just can't do it anymore. And he said, he didn't necessarily tell me to stop. He just basically said, hey, I have a friend who's another pastor, and he just did some sermons on this, and he's been through it himself. You know, just go watch these for me. And maybe he'll be able to really help you because he's had that same mental headspace before. And that's where all this got started. But where it really got started was I was adopted. I was born into a family with a mom who was addicted to drugs. One of my biological uncles told me later when I was questioning and found my biological family, yeah, your mom used to just show up with a kid and then she'd run off again and show up with another one. So I was adopted, and I was adopted into a family that, looking at us, we were the perfect, average American family, 2-story house, dog, mom, dad, son, daughter. However, it wasn't so nice and clean and good, and once those doors shut. I was raised in a Southern Baptist church, and there's a huge difference between Baptist and Southern Baptist. I actually refer to it as a cult. Coming as we all are dressed in jeans and a t-shirt or a nice shirt, that wouldn't have been allowed for me, sorry. That wouldn't have been allowed for me. Women wore dresses. You were not to look like a man at all. You were not to wear men's clothing. You did everything that the man said. You, as a woman, we didn't have voices. We were supposed to just look pretty and smile and sit there. That's what the church was teaching me, but that's not what my mama was teaching me, and I would go to my mama's house every day after school. And the God that my mama talked about was this amazing man that, you know, he helped everybody, he loved everybody. But that's not what I was learning at church. I recall at one point, the church actually kicked a homeless guy out because he smelled and other people didn't want him there. That's wrong to me. And I personally believe that God does send down angels to test whether or not we are good. And I believe that that homeless man was most likely an angel, and that he didn't find what he was looking for because God was not in our church. I think he was in the people, certain people, truly believe that, but as the church a whole, no. So I'm getting about maybe 10 years old, and now I'm starting these church camps. Went to church camp, and I know that y'all have probably heard about the Southern Baptist Convention releasing their book on findings of children who have been molested and churches who have molested. Hi, I'm one of those statistics. My church pastor started by teaching me how to play strip poker at church camp. And this was supposed to be a safe place. When I started talking about it, because at that age, I just knew that I was learning cards and it was a cool game from my pastor. I didn't really realize what strip poker was. I got told that I needed to keep my mouth shut, that I could ruin people's lives. And then I got sent off to a facility that was associated with our church. And I lived there until I was 17. And it was shut down for child labor and child abuse. Through all this, mentally, I was an unstable kid. I really was. But how could you not be when you're living in that kind of environment? I got out, and I'll just be frank. I started giving up on God and trying to find the love that my mama had talked about from God, and also my Aunt Lane, who she passed last month, is an amazing person. I was trying to find this God, but I was trying to find it in men now because I didn't know any other way. And I ended up hitchhiking across the country, and I would run into people who would bring up God. One of those guys got me Doc Martens. He was a trucker out with his son, and he saw that my shoes were raggedy and he wanted to buy me new shoes, so he bought me Doc Martens so that they'd last. Another lady, she gave me a job so that I could earn some money for the day. It was a $50 a day kind of thing under the table, but so that I could eat. And these people always talked about the same God, this loving God, okay? But I hadn't seen him. Every time I went to church, I did not see God. I did not see this loving, being that was just light and love. I didn't see that. So I came back, and I decided, okay, well, maybe it's because I'm not submitting and not doing everything that I'm supposed to do that the church has told me to do. Maybe that's why they hate me. And so that's when I was married off to my first husband. It was basically an arranged marriage. And I was 18. And I started getting hit on a regular basis, regularly. I went to the church. I was told I needed to submit to my husband, that I basically needed to do whatever I needed to do in order to not get beat, that it was my fault. So I left. I left him. I left the church. I left everybody. I said, screw God. Like, completely, because if God isn't what I had been taught by my mama and my aunt, then I don't need him. I don't want him. And so after that divorce, I married another man. And his name was Josh. I had 2 children with Josh. I also had 3 trips via medical helicopter shock trauma because of Josh. It was not good at all. And at this time, Hurricane Katrina hits. I had been living in New Orleans, and I took off because of the storm. And I ran in, and it was my son's first birthday, and I ran into a lady because I was at the hospital, and she was like, hey, come down to my restaurant tomorrow. It's called Zion, and your meal's free. And I was like, okay. And I went down there, and she started talking to me about God again. Like, all these people just randomly in my life have come up and talked about this love and God, but I still haven't seen him. Like, where is he? What ended up, FEMA, and I'm one of the ones that FEMA stuck on a plane and shipped up to DC. Got up here, My daughter's born at that point, and I'm still with Josh, and I'm still getting beat. And I turned to my adopted mom and I said, listen, can you please just let me come stay with you for a while so that I can get this? And she said, what have we always told you? Submit to your husband and you won't get beat. Do whatever you got to do to not get beat. You're not going to come here because that's going to ruin my life with the church and that's going to ruin my life with my new husband. Okay? So one day, I have to go to some type of medical appointment. And I run in to the gas station to pay for gas, and I realize I don't have my card on me. I knew that if I was to go back home, I would get beat for being stupid and for not having my card. He had cameras on the house. He had people that he would pay to sit outside to watch my every move. So how was I going to pay for the gas? And this guy comes up to me and he says, hey, he goes, I'll pay for your gas, but I need you to go across the street to the gas station really quick. I mean, not to the gas station, to the coffee shop, because you and I need to talk, and that's all I want for paying for your gas. And I thought, okay, what's 5 minutes for a tank of gas so that I don't get beat? Like, that's really where my brain was at. And I go over there, and the guy's name is Justin. And he says, I've just noticed some marks on your arms, you know, little things. And I'm sitting here doing the typical abused, lying scenario. Yeah, that's, you know, from a fall. That's from, it wasn't. You could tell. They were thumbprints. They're not fall-down bruises. And I go in there, and he says, listen, I know the situation you're in, and you can try to lie to me all you want. He said, but if you want out, I'll get you out. And here he goes, telling him that God's told him these things and that he needs to help me. And I'm like, okay, I don't know why all these people keep coming to me about God, because if God was real, I wouldn't be getting my butt beat on a regular basis. If God was real, I wouldn't have been raped at 15 years old and forced by this same church to go have an abortion when I wanted to give it up for adoption. If God was real, these things wouldn't be happening. But at this point, I've thought about it, and I've had guns pulled on me and triggers pulled. Why the guns being pulled on me? You know, they just they weren't loaded. And I needed to get my kids out of that situation. I knew that much. I was fine with me dying. I wasn't okay with my kids dying. And so I agreed. And he gave me some information, and he gave me his girlfriend at the time's telephone number, and I was to communicate through it with her, but it was really going to be him. That way Josh wouldn't know. And that did get me out. And Justin moved me from the Maryland side of D.C. to Northern Virginia, Manassas. The place was in his name. It wasn't in mine. And I literally went legally missing for 2 years. The courts would not relinquish where I lived, but they knew where I lived. After that, I got in another relationship with a guy named Chris. Chris was amazing. Chris is amazing. I wish Chris was here today. my children's father had kind of written them off because he learned that he couldn't control me with him. Chris came in. Chris knew all the damage. He knew I didn't hide anything. And he said, okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to raise kids together. These are mine. It's who my kids call Dad. And we did. And all this stuff just, I hadn't really worked through it all. I was just pushing on with a smile on my face every day because my kids were not going to grow up in the situation that I had them in, and I got them out. I held on to that. I got them out for a long time. Even though now I know God did, but I held on to I got them out. And Justin and Chris became best friends, and honestly, those two would do anything for me, and I absolutely know that still today. But anyhow, 2017, I met my best friend, who's actually in the audience, and we started hopping jobs together. And one of those jobs came up, and she left because she didn't like the vibes it was giving off. But I needed a job. And now we're in 2019, 2020. And one of my bosses, Chris and I are going through just a trouble situation. Not bad, but not good. Kind of at that mark where you get in your marriage where you're like, okay, well, the honeymoon phase is over. How do we communicate? And you got to learn to love the other person. We decided to take a split break. He's still an amazing father, still amazing to me, but we took a break. He was going through some of his own stuff as also. And anyhow, one of my bosses starts harassing me regularly. Taking it as far as commenting on my womanly area down south on a regular basis, telling me I need to wear tighter jeans so that it can outline it more. Two other bosses hopped on this bandwagon with him. Amy was gone at this point. And the next thing I know, I'm in the locker room at night to change for my shift into jeans, t-shirt, and steel-toe boots and a hoodie. And all three of them came in, and I was assaulted. So again, I'm at this point of, I don't really think that this God is, that I've been holding hope onto, this loving God, I don't think he's real. I went through the lawsuit. There was so much evidence found that I was the fastest at work sexual assault case West Virginia has ever gone through. Not my proudest moment, but I'm there. So then, after the lawsuit, I kind of went crazy for a little bit. I did, because that didn't mean that these guys were arrested. In fact, I was at a stoplight, and one of them honks his horn multiple times to get my attention, and then proceeds to go. He's taunting me. Another one, my son and I went at Christmas time to the mall, but we went to a mall 2 hours away. Here he comes out of the side of the store. And my son notices and puts himself in between me and the guy and put his hand on me and pushed me forward as to walk, like, keep walking, Mom. At this time, things have just gotten really difficult. My son has gone through a lot because he went back looking for his dad, and his dad dropped him off at a homeless shelter after his dad's girlfriend gave them the choice. It can either be your son or it can be me. Which one is it? And so I'm dealing with my son going through that. I'm trying to stay strong. I have all this going on. And I personally just want to be at peace and pass. I just want to die. And it's just staying and staying. And then comes last year. And I come across that after sitting in the woods at my house, getting ready to literally hang myself. I meet Mark first. I've known Floyd the longest, but I've met Mark first. But Floyd offered me, after hearing my story, he said, I really think that this needs to be heard. And that was the first time ever in my life people have told me to speak about my story. Most people have told me to be quiet, that nobody wants to hear the bad side, that nobody wants to deal with the negativity, that my stories just shows how much of a burden and how troubled I am. But after meeting Floyd and Mark and talking to them regularly and asking the silliest questions, or I feel like they're silly, but I was told I couldn't, because my grandma used to burn sage, not for anything other than kind of like her version of air freshener. And I was like, is it okay to do this? Because I've grown up in a church that says, if you burn sage, then you're going to hell. And I'll never forget Mark saying, well, do you think it has some superpowers? And I was like, no, I just want the smell from to remind me of my grandma. And he's like, then no, it's not a problem. And I went to Mark's church. And that was the first church that I had ever stepped in. Because I was trying to find my own church at that time. But I stepped in Mark's. And I'll never forget it, because it truly showed me again how God works. I had been raised with a woman has to wear a dress, period. No ifs, ands, buts about it. Well, I had brought a dress because I was going to still deal with all this, but it was like a cream-colored white dress. And it was supposed to be clear skies, but it all of a sudden started pouring rain. Now, if you're a girl, you know you can't wear a cream white dress in the middle of a rainstorm, or it's going to become see-through. So what do I have? My only other options were pants. This was God's way of showing me that it was okay to wear pants in a church. It was okay for me to come as I am. And I nearly cried because there was a woman in the audience who looked just like my aunt. And it was, again, God's way of, it's okay, we're going to bring you somebody who is going to visually be able to be comfort to you. And things started happening, and I started noticing it, and I even told my friend, I told Amy the other day, I said, you don't understand how much my life has changed. You really don't. Like, the peace that I have within, the fact that I just pray, if I don't feel like my prayers are strong enough, I have Floyd, I have Mark, I have all these people that do care. And that honestly are my family. It's that church family that I've always heard about. But I didn't know where to find it. It wasn't around me. My late last year, my son actually took off to, at one point, he took off to go to New Mexico. And he didn't tell me where he was going. Well, I knew where he was going, but he didn't tell me, like, when he was going to be back. He didn't follow through with anything. And he went missing. I asked Mark and I asked Floyd, what do I do? And they're like, we just pray. We pray. Are you freaking... My son is missing and you want me to pray? Like, I need guidance at this point. Yes, I'm a parent, but I've never been down this road before. Floyd's kids are older. Like, help me out. Just pray. Okay. And I did. And my son called me. And my son said, Mom, I have to do this all on my own. This is something I have to do. I didn't want to disappoint you. That's the reason I quit talking to you. And I was like, it's not disappointment. It's I'm scared. I couldn't get a hold of you. I didn't know where you were. And peace came at that. And I started talking to my son and, we became the best friends again that we always had. I don't know if anybody else has a freaking 20-year-old son, but they're not big on picking up phone calls. And my kid calls me. My kid will ask me to even pray for him. Since then, he's doing remarkable. He's upgraded his apartment, and we're back to having our same bonding relationship. But, now I actually speak out also about these programs. Because these kind of programs that I was in are actually quite common, and it's really quite sad. And I found out that several other people that I worked with have also been put in these kind of programs, these child labor programs. It's amazing the blessings that come your way when you really open your eyes. I truly believe that I went through all this solely because God knew that this day would come. This day of me sitting in front of you guys, me talking at Mark's church, me talking on the podcast, and that somebody else out there needs to hear it, needs to know that they're not the only one who's getting abused at church, that God's not in every church. He's really not. And some of these people that I even see and hear on Facebook and different sites that teach hate, no. My aunt used to say something all the time to me. God doesn't teach hate, he washes feet. And it's true. We're not supposed to hate one another. We're not supposed to judge one another. The only judge is God, and it says that in the Bible. And it's hard, and we're not supposed to watch each other's pockets. Your blessings are for you, mine are for me. That doing those kind of things can just bring so much mental problems as you start going, well, why can't I have this? Why can't I have this? Why can't I? Because you're not them. That's not your purpose here. And yeah, so here I am today. And God is an amazing human being. God, I truly believe God brought Floyd and Mark into my life that night. And the reason that I truly believe this is because it was TikTok. And there's millions upon millions of pastors and millions of people. But how would I reach to the man, Floyd, who knew a pastor that lived close to him, but who grew up in the area that I live in? Like, it was just all too connected. That I still today, you cannot tell me that it wasn't God. You can't. I fully have it in my head because the connections were so close. And out of all these millions of people, you're at max, you're gonna 3 hours away. Somebody who literally could save me if I need it, 3 hours. And Mark, his niece, lives down the road from me. Like, all these people back to my little small podunk West Virginia town. And that's it. If y'all have any questions, I'll answer them. Yeah, there's some awesome people. No, it's not at all.
So first, tissue.
Thank you.
I know, we're running a little bit behind, but that's okay. I have a couple of questions. And if you guys have any questions, just raise your hand, because I'm sure Brie would be okay answering those. And the first one is, I will say this, I really never expected to hear from you again. I'm just being honest, because sometimes people will reach out and I'll be like, hey, how can I help? Or here's what can I do, or whatever. And especially because when you responded, when you messaged me, I was just looking at this the other day. When you messaged me, I responded back with, hey, here's other people who can help. And you could have easily took that as, okay, he's brushing me off. Because I directed you to this woman named Ashley, who does Instagrams about her depression and her anxiety and how God helps her through it. And then I was like, you could have easily taken that as, okay, I reached out to you. You said, how can I help? I reached out to you, and you're like, yeah, go do this or go do that. So what made you actually reach out to Mark? Because you could have taken it as, okay, I don't want to be blown off again.
So when you gave me Mark and her information, I felt more connected to Mark's story because Mark had, just like you said I would find, sermons on this. And when I reached out to him, he was like, yeah, I've been there, picked my own tree too. And the fact that he understood that, and the fact that, you know, his was so similar, that's what kept me around.
And for those of you who do not know Mark, he has preached here. He was the teaching pastor here before he moved to, where is he now? Meadow Run Community Church. And actually, when he went there, he and I drove out there and prayed over that church before he accepted being the pastor there. So I'm glad, and again, grateful that you did reach out to him. But so I have another question, because Mark had directed and said, hey, here's a church that you could try. And that first church that you tried, it's not the one you're at now, but the first church, it was a large church.
It was a large church. It was a great church, don't get me wrong, but it was a large church. And being that it was a large church, it really threw me back into, even though the teachings weren't the same, I didn't like that it was a big church that you got lost in and that you weren't a close-knit connection with. My kid, thriving at that church, and that's her church. Me? It wasn't, it didn't feel home.
This is home. Okay, so when you walked in that first day, though, what was going through your head? Because the last time you were in church, you know, you had all these other things go on, and I mean, what was going through your head first time you walked into that church? after talking to Mark, talking to me, all that stuff.
Why are you crazy? Why are you crazy? Why are you doing this again?
So not a feeling of comfort and peace.
No.
Anxiety.
It was anxiety. I mean, honestly, like, it felt like somebody was putting their hand on my chest and, like, trying to prevent me from coming in. And, like, I was fighting that. Almost like when you go to the beach and there's, like, waves coming and you can't walk out. Like, that was the feeling. The first time. It was just, why are you even doing this? This is...
And what made you go back a second time?
The fact that I cried. The fact that I literally cried because it just felt right. And there was things that were said that reminded me of things my grandma, my mama would say, and my aunt would say. And those are the two who always showed me God. Those were the two. That's the only reason I knew God was because of those two. If I had listened to the church, in all honesty, I wouldn't have known God.
That is something that breaks my heart. That there are, not just you, but people everywhere who walk into churches, and I don't think people understand what you mean when you say God is not in every church. God wants to be in every church, but the people in every church, they don't want God there. They want their religion there. They want their way there. The diatrophies that the Apostle John was talking about, they want their stuff there. And God's like, okay, you don't want me there, I won't be there. But then when people like you go looking for God there, they don't find God, they don't find his love, they don't find his forgiveness, they don't find freedom from addiction and brokenness and hope. They find hate and judgment and ridicule and harassment, which should not be the case. Now, let me share this. So, do you feel like you had a general mistrust of Christians overall?
Oh, yeah.
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 Okay. So, you and I were talking about this with Amy yesterday, and I want to share this with you because there's nothing spectacular that Mark and I did other than act like we gave a darn, and I said darn, because I don't want Rita going home and saying the other word. All right, so I said darn. We just acted like we gave a darn, because that's what Christians are supposed to do, right? It's throughout the Bible. We're supposed to help one another, lift one another, encourage one another, all that stuff. And granted, it can be messy, because you get other people's stuff on you, but that's what the kingdom of God is about. But I want to share this with you, because I thought this was interesting. And I actually, when you brought it up yesterday, I was going to say something. I was like, let me not, because I had already included this in something I wanted to share with you, because there's another guy who reached out. I make a lot of videos. You guys know that. Made a video. Another guy reached out. He said, can you please make a video discussing envy and how we can combat it effectively? I struggle with giving in to feelings of envy and FOMO, fear of missing out, and jealousy. Thank you. And so I made a video talking about that. And this is a guy who has reached out to me numerous times. Sometimes I'll just respond to him in a message. Other times I'm like, you know what? That's a really good question. Can you put it in a comment so I can make a video? Because other people maybe have the same question or feel in the same way. So I responded to his video, and this is what you responded. You said, don't watch people's pockets is always my go-to reminder. Before I even get to that, even though it's her comment, it says cheese pickle.
Okay, so let me explain the cheese pickle thing. So it's actually just a funny take on my name. That's really it. My first name is Brie, spelled B-R-I-E. My last name is pronounced Diehl.
So like cheese and pickle. Okay, all right. So your good comment, great response, don't watch people's pockets. It's always my go-to reminder. His response was, that's easier said than done with social media. I'm going to take a social media break during the summer. It's hard for me being poor and seeing everybody else go on lavish vacations. And I responded to him about that on, here's some things you can do to just make sure you take time for you. But what was interesting was your response to him, because you said, I understand it's easier said than done, and I understand being the person with less. I'm not going on a lavish vacay at all this summer, and I want you to read the last sentence that you said.
If you need a friend to talk to, I'm here to listen.
So you went from, I don't trust people, people have hurt me, to being the person that's, how can I give a darn about you? What made you do that?
I want to be like you and Mark. That's the honest reason.
I was hoping you were going to say Jesus, but
No, but I want to be a teacher of Jesus the way that you and Mark are, and not necessarily in a church. I don't want to. This is not my forte, but I want somebody there the way that they were there for me. That's important to me, and if I do nothing else in life, if I can just help one person to really come to and to really see that God is actually awesome and he's loving. And if you're being taught that, that women aren't allowed to talk, or that we have, be put in our place, or, being, if your child is being touched by the youth pastor, like, I get it, I'm here. It's a sucky place to be, but I know that there's other people. And
I need one too. So
I'd rather you come to me, somebody who knows and can relate, because, yeah.
So I'm going to say this also as we wind down. If you know of anyone that's dealing with stuff like that, please do not be silent. And if you go to any church leader, any fellow Christian, or anyone, and they tell you to be quiet, go to someone else. Go to someone in here, reach out to Brie online. Yeah. She'll share her information with you. Go to someone. If you know of people in your circles of influence that are dealing with that, listen to them. Listen to them. And I know there's a lot of, it may not be true. And I told you this during the podcast that after hearing the details, in depth of her story, I was like, I really apologize, and I probably need to apologize to a lot of people who have used the phrase, I've been hurt by the church. And although I was respectful, I was probably a little dismissive, thinking, somebody just didn't get up and let you sit down, or they made you move because they were in your seat, or maybe the pastor preached on something and it wasn't about you, but it triggered something in you and you felt it was about you, but you were actually living in sin, and he didn't call you out, he called out sin, and you were hurt. And I was like, but there are people who have dealt with stuff like you've dealt with, and their church trauma is real, and they're hurting, and they're running away from the church in droves, and they're not asking for people to solve all their problems. They just want to know that someone will give a darn and listen. So I'm going to ask if some of the women can, I'm going to ask you to come down here and ask if some of the women can stand up. I'm not going to ask everyone to come forward and lay hands, but if you could step down there and ask some of the women to stand up, and we're going to just pray for Brie. And we're also, we were going to sing, but I think we've gone long enough. So this may seem weird to some of you, but instead of asking you to come forward and lay hands, I'm going to ask you to just reach your hands out towards her as if you were. God, we thank you so much for Brie's story. We thank you so much for the redemptive process that you did in her life. We thank you so much that you were able to allow her, through other people, to experience your goodness, your grace, and your mercy. We thank you for the healing process that you're walking her through. We thank you that you embraced her, that you loved her, and that you showed it to her. And we pray that, as she said, you would use her to help other people who are feeling that they are not heard, who are feeling that they have been hurt by the church, or who are just wanting to know, where is God amidst my pain and my hurt and just the trials of my life? And God, we know there are so many other people out there that are feeling the same way, going through the same thing. And we pray that you would raise up other Bries in other communities, in other congregations, in other cities and states and workplaces who can help direct people into your loving embrace. And we thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. And everyone said, amen. Darn it, Amy, I was holding back the tears till you came up and hugged me. All right. Ask you guys to give Brie a hand.
We hope you enjoyed the message. If you did, please leave a comment on our webpage, crossroadsofjeffersonhills.com, or our Facebook page. You can also join our Sunday celebration every Sunday at 10:37 a.m. We look forward to hearing from you online or in person. Thank you and God bless.